Hello, Paul. Thank you very much. Appreciate the time. Let's skip through the notes and on to the next page, please. Next page. So let me quickly go through this, a bit more time on the next page for some context, and I'll spend most of our time on the New Tennessee project. As you mentioned, Amaero originally was focused on prototyping of 3D parts, came out of Monash University in 2013, had a great pedigree in material science, powder metallurgy, as well as the cross-section of metal 3D printing, did a fair amount of prototype work for aerospace and defense companies, as well as space, launch systems, and such. And that's really the value out of the company, is that intersection of applied material science, powder metallurgy, and additive manufacturing, where we're now pivoting and spending time with the company is much more focused, given the larger size of the market opportunity in advanced materials, and thus the project we'll speak about here in a moment, Tennessee. Next page. A bit of background here, and somewhat unique, I think, about this opportunity. By background, I'm a private equity investor. I got involved in Amaero, led a fundraising in May of 2022, and came on the board. You see this one arrow coming down where the stock sells off sharply. I came on the board in July of that year, and as we reviewed the operations, it became clear to us that the prior announced project in Victoria wasn't a suitable facility, wasn't scalable to the degree that we would have the profit margins that we think is appropriate, coupled with a very difficult environment to work in from an operations standpoint and very high electricity rates. I announced that we were canceling that project, had another business in the UAE, and we began focusing on the UAE for an alternative site where we had very strong relationships, the benefit of the country being geopolitically neutral, long-term low-cost electricity, and favorable capital formation. We fully underwrote a financing in December. Pegasus today, a private equity company, owns 40% of the ordinary shares. I personally own a bit more than half of that. I stepped into that time in the role of chairman and CEO. I think on the downside, when we made this first investment, there was more restructuring required than we had understood. On the upside, I think we have determined the opportunity is bigger than we first understood. And as we'll see here in a moment, as we talk about the Tennessee opportunity, we were advancing the UAE. We had announced that we would greenlight that project in June of this year. And basically, in the final 6 weeks of that project, we'd received a term sheet from Emirates Development Bank in the UAE. We had advanced all of our designs for a large build-to-suit in the UAE. We were aggressively courted by 6 states in the U.S., West Virginia, South Carolina, Arizona, Texas, Utah, and Tennessee. In the end, Tennessee quickly mobilized not only economic support, but also brought in Tennessee Valley Authority for very low-cost electricity, brought in Oak Ridge National Lab, and brought in 100,000 square foot, or what would that be, 9,800-ish square meter facility that is just being finished. Next page, please. The benefit of this, which we announced on July 14th, and the real benefit you'll see of our ability to do business in Tennessee, where I've got deep relationships in the States, is from the very first meeting with Tennessee to signing binding agreements with 5 counterparties, it was 5 weeks. Again, this included taking over a facility, a 15-year lease on a 100,000 square foot building that is now complete from a shell standpoint. We will begin tenant improvements on that building. We will add a 30,000 square foot or 2,800 square meter extension that is a 50-foot high bay for our manufacturing. The benefit of stepping in this facility is it accelerated our equipment installation by 12 months and saves us $22 million of working capital. There, as you probably know, is enormous national attention in the U.S. to reshore critical activities. Amaero sits right in the middle of 3. Critical minerals, being titanium, defense production, given the titanium powder that we make for aerospace and defense industry, and advanced manufacturing, particularly where we're focused on alternative manufacturing that can replace forgings and castings, where there's a lot of non-performance pressure for the aerospace and defense companies. Next page, please. This is the facility that we're moving into and beginning the tenant improvements. In a very thoughtful manner, a county, Bradley County in Tennessee, established an industrialization board, and on purely spec basis, developed a 320-acre industrial park developed this 100,000 square foot building, sloping from 35 feet to 30 feet. Again, the shell of this has just been completed. We'll step in and begin tenant improvements. The first EIGA, which is the most advanced technology in the world, the titanium powder technology currently used is twofold. Canada used something called plasma atomization with wire feed, titanium wire feed. The US and Europe uses electrode inert gas atomization. That's this EIGA, both of which yield about 20% of total powder in the highest value laser powder bed fusion spectrum. The benefit of the technology that we have is it is 50% yield. It is more than a 2-to-1 productivity increase from current technology. We have acquired the second plant made by a premier industrial manufacturer in Germany, and will now contract to acquire a second, third, and a fourth. So we'll have 4 of the first 5 plants in the world. The first one's currently operating in Germany. As you see here, the next 12 months, we will fit out this building, begin installation of equipment. Calendar year 25, we'll have our first revenue from powder shipments. 26, we'll go break even. 27 will be at capacity with 800 tons, the most state-of-the-art powder production facility in the US. To put that in context, it's about $150 million Australian in revenue at about a 22 to 23% net margin. So that facility alone, upon reaching capacity, has a value of around $650 million Australian. Next, please. Again, this shows you the facility, gives you a sense of the size. As you may know, the Southeast of the US has been very, very active and most aggressive at attracting this advanced manufacturing. There's a large installed aerospace and defense cluster of business there. Volkswagen is 2 exits away down I-75, the most major interstate thoroughfare in the US. And then we've got proximity to Oak Ridge National Lab, the premier defense and science lab in the US, as well as University of Tennessee. Next, please. Gives you an idea of the plant. This is actually the plant that has been completed. We'll put on the water in September to ship to the US. Titanium alloy powder, as you may know, is critical in aerospace and defense applications, as well as things such as medical, other industrial applications. Heretofore, we've been largely dependent for the supply chain on Russia and China. Obviously, with COVID followed by the Ukraine crisis, it exposes vulnerability, and thus there's a strong effort to build resiliency and reshore this capability in the US and allied countries. The challenge in some of the allied countries, such as Germany, is they've seen a huge spike in energy prices. In the US, with TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, we will be sub 5 cents per kilowatt hour US electricity. By comparison, Germany today would be about 40 cents a kilowatt hour. Again, tying in with the national programs, there's significant Department of Defense as well as Department of Energy capital available. And we're working closely with aerospace primes such as Raytheon, Boeing, and others. Next slide, please. As you see, we've got significant support, and all of this came about in 5 weeks. It really gives you the sense of how quickly they can mobilize. It's also the benefit of being 57 years old and where I'm in my career and having significant personal relationships, as well as being very established in the equity community. Next page, just more of the same endorsements that supported us. And then finally, probably the most interestingly, the last page. I look at this in the context, as I said, as a private equity investor, albeit we're a public company. We will make announcements shortly where I think we will see significant re-rating. We really spent the last 12 months restructuring this business, repositioning this business for it'll be a significant growth and line of sight to revenue. In the very near term, meaning over the next several months, you'll see significant announcements relating to financial capital, human capital, and sovereign capital, all of which I think will be price-sensitive announcements and will reset us on a trajectory towards increasing the cadence of these market-moving announcements. With that, I'm welcome to take questions, Paul.
Thanks. Got a few questions for you. Your recent announcement indicated that the acceleration in the installation of the titanium powder plant will bring forward break-even operations by about 12 months. When do you anticipate to be cash flow positive?
It will be cash flow positive in calendar year 26. So we'll have our first revenue in calendar year 25. And then we will be at capacity scale in calendar year 27.
And then once completed, what will the company's position be in the global titanium supply chain? And what is the global demand looking like for powder production?
So when we were going to be in the UAE, the assumption is about 60% of our demand would go to Europe. Given the high energy price, we would have supplanted a lot of installed capacity. In the US right now, the challenge, you've got two benefits working for us. A, you've got this reshoring focus, and so a step function in demand as we relocate capacity that's been elsewhere, coupled with you've got strong adoption, aerospace and defense, also such things as nuclear, other specialty alloys, super alloys, and then you've got things such as space, alloys needed with high temperature, right? C103 alone is an example of Ti-64 we would use as kind of the workhorse metal we would dedicate some of these IGAs to. We would keep a development IGA to these much higher value specialty alloys. It's a slower process. The price is about 20 times as high. And so it's quite likely that we will have 100% of the demand coming from the US. I don't think that we will be able to provide adequate supply for the demand that we have. Beyond that, you would have outside the US. And beyond that, from a sector standpoint, you would have outside aerospace and defense, i.e. medical. The question is whether or not we'll be able to address those demands initially.
Gotcha. And there's a question here. Is there room in this market for you and Hyperion, especially since they have titan resource to integrate to their recycling tech?
Yeah, it's complementary. It's not competitive. So the high quality spherical titanium powder that we create is used in hot components of aerospace, defense, and so forth. Hyperion X is a fantastic company, great for the titanium supply chain, but it will be used in consumer products. It will be used in a whole host of things that aren't mission critical, if you will, a much lower value. You could not qualify recycled titanium in the type of applications that we serve.
Thanks. And what's the likelihood of working with the UAE on other future projects?
So we've announced the interest, and we think there's a strong need to vertically integrate the midstream titanium supply chain. So melt and then various form factors of feedstock, forge and mill. We have continued very strong interest from the UAE and KSA, where I have relationships. Right now, our focus is delivering on Tennessee. We've got a lot of very near-stone milestones that I think will be important. You'll see some very key hires imminently as well. We are continuing to work with stakeholder relationships we have over there. And essentially, we've challenged them, come to us with a proposal, candidly, that we can't turn down, meaning very, very favorable capital formation. We'll see what comes of that. It potentially could be an interesting opportunity. At the very same time, you've got places such as Quebec with hydropower that are trying to attract us to build the same operation there. Tennessee is a great place to operate. It's been a seminal move to be back in the US, and particularly in an environment where we have so many direct relationships, but there's an abundance, of opportunities within the titanium supply chain.
Hank, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today, and we were watching the story very closely, and we'll get you back on later in the year. Have a great weekend.
Thank you very much, Paul.